part of the reason for the title there is, I'm not sure if many of you read The Economist, or have a chance to read The Economist, or whether you have a personal life, but I on occasions do read The Economist. And the good thing about The Economist, of course, or the useful thing from our perspective, is that it brings an international view. It comes from outside Australia. And if you have a chance, it's worthwhile trying to dig out. They did a review of Australia not too long ago in a bit of depth. And it's quite interesting to get an outsider's perspective of Australia, because I think it's very different to how we see Australia at the moment from within. And their perspective, whilst having a crack at political debates, they're having a bit of a go at that, and they also had a bit of a go at Brexit, which I thought was quite interesting. But fundamentally, they saw Australia really as really in a golden phase. A golden part of the world at the moment, a fantastic opportunistic part of the world, and also in terms of the stage of history, a fantastic point of time as well. And if you think about Australia, fundamentally the arguments they're putting in a lot of detail, they saw us in a way as the California of the late 70s. Huge opportunity, huge potential. And if you think about us within the Hunter, we're also within a bit of a sweet spot within Australia. We have access to the resources and the opportunities that are coming through there. At the same time, we're not so exposed to it that potentially we're concerned about the pace of growth that we're getting there, and or the downside when that phase eventually fades away. So why 6 billion? Hence part of that headline. So the labour market. As you can see there, it's the recovery from the global financial crisis, and we were shooting away. We had fiscal stimulus there, we had monetary policy stimulus, they dropped rates dramatically, and we, the regional economy picked up very quickly. But we've gone into this major slowdown, so the labour market has definitely come off, as you can see there, and that's what purposeful. It is effectively what the Reserve Bank wanted, the Treasury wanted to try and take the heat out of the economy, and we saw it in the region. The unemployment rate is actually, the latest unemployment rate is 3.1%, and that would give you, it's phenomenal times, and that would give you a sense that, really the labour market is still very tight, which slides a bit in contrast to that chart. But the reason I put this chart up here is this is participation rate, which gives you a sense of the number of people who are employed and unemployed as a proportion of the total demographic that could be looking for work. And as you can see there, in the global financial crisis, more and more people were coming out looking for work because they saw that potential of getting a job as being good. But then since then, it's fallen away. Participation rate has fallen away from about 65% to 61%. We call this the discouraged worker effect, basically. So basically, they don't believe the position's there, and so they fade away. So that's one of the bits of evidence to suggest that the unemployment rate of 3.1% is a bit misleading. We do have a softening off in the labour market and the regional economy. The other bit of data in the labour market that gives us an indication of that is also job ads. Job advertising was growing very strongly during the global financial crisis recovery. We've seen it waning away for a while now, and it's definitely carried on that trend of softening. That suggests that the labour market it's not weak, but it's definitely softened off, and that's going to carry on for the next quarter or so. Of course, we have a lot of different currents going within the regional economy, so to give a bit of insight into that, I've just picked 3 particular industries here. There are also a lot more industries that employ total employment within them over the long term. Being the industries I picked here are mining, manufacturing, retail, trade. Mining, surprise, exceptional long-term growth. It's not a huge employer. It's a relatively capital-intensive industry, so it's its employment rate belies its influence. But when it comes down to it, we've grown from about 7,000 people working in this particular sector up to about 17,000. We've got about at least double than that and more in terms of people working there. And that's no big surprise, of course, it's a reflection of the strength in that particular sector. Retail trade, on the other hand, that circles a bit of an exaggeration because we're taking it from a peak there, but when it comes down to it, it's an illustration of the softening in the retail side. It's not been so good there, and we know that, and that's reflected in the employment data. Manufacturing, on the other hand, is another curiosity, actually. Manufacturing, we know nationally, is facing headwinds there. We're facing headwinds of currency, and also in terms of business investment, we know they're pretty flat and they're not very confident at the moment. But within the region, it looks like a lot of guys have managed to turn their particular business to from making corrugated fences for a weak housing sector to making grinding balls for a booming WA resources market. And whilst I don't think we can suggest that manufacturing growth is going to continue at that pace, because at some stage the high currency and the competition they get from there is really going to start challenging that growth. but at the same time it's been a remarkable performance over the past couple of years. Of course, these industries are not laid out evenly across the regional economy, so I thought it would be a good idea to give us a bit of insight about what's going on within the region. Now, just to explain this map to you briefly, just because it's a bit fuzzy, it's nice and clear on my laptop, but it's not so great when it goes through all the wires. We've got Barrington Tops up here, Port Stephens here, Wollamai here, Newcastle there, Lake Macquarie. And what this shows you is the unemployment rate on a statistical local area, so a smaller scale. And the darker the area, basically, the tighter to the labour market. And surprise, surprise, the darkness is, Muswellbrook, Singleton, Dungog. It's where all the resources investment is going on. Phenomenally tight labour markets up there, around 1%. Basically, you've got full employment in those markets. As you get into the edge of the Lower Hunter here, we have deeper labour markets, so it's not a big surprise that they're not quite as tight, but at the same time, they're still benefiting from this. But the other point, other than the fact that the strength of how this is flying through in terms of the Upper Hunter and spilling into the edge of the Lower Hunter, is that really that everywhere is still benefiting. I mean, the worst statistical local area on that particular chart is the latest figures being the March quarter, is the Great Lakes area. But in reality, the unemployment rate there is 7.1%, which is quite, that's not a bad rate in historical terms. That's phenomenally tight. It's down from 9%. So these numbers bounce around a little bit, but the point being is that the Upper Hunter is phenomenally strong at the moment from an employment point of view. But at the same time, the whole region is benefiting, and that's coming through in terms of the employment. That's reflected here. So, to wrap up again. Why so gloomy? If you look at it from the outside, things are pretty strong. The reason you're feeling gloomy is because the housing touches the retail side. You're not actually going out spending yourself, and people are putting money aside and all that kind of thing. But when it comes down to it, that's because it's strong storage, because it's a managed slowdown, and the pressure is being put on those sides not to spend to manage this growth. There are plenty of places in the world that would be dying for that situation. There are plenty, even within Australia, the Gold Coast and tourism-focused areas would be dying for that situation. Regional economic growth is pretty robust, but it's definitely slow policy intervention. That's the point. We've managed to slow down rather than there's no demand and how we generate it. We slow demand consciously, and therefore that means that we can undo it as well. That's at the national scale, of course, but within the region will reflect that. There's still substantial momentum for resources and resource-related infrastructure, and that will keep on underpinning our regional economy over the next few years for sure. But the higher interest rate context is definitely producing soft, not dire, but soft consumption and the flat housing market. And that's effectively what the central bank wanted to achieve, and we're seeing that within the region. But we're not in a desperate situation, but at the same time, that's why the guys in retail, that's why some of the guys in housing are just not, struggling. And that's why it feels gloomy, because it's the largest part of the economy and it touches bases in our households. And looking forward, the things that are going to vary away from that, resource expenditure is going to carry on. The only thing is if we have a major event on the global horizon, that's the only thing that will really impact on that. The same with the global financial crisis did. I'll leave that next speaker to inform us on that one. For the other sectors, it really comes down to the RBS view, as you saw with Westpac recently. Their perspective was that the domestic sector's consumption and household were actually tanking, and they were going too far. And in a way, that relates to that's the whole point of this chart. Basically, you don't even have to have a small stone over on this side, but because it's a large part of the economy, if that gets out of whack, the whole thing gets out of balance very quickly. We have very strong growth over here on the resources side, but they're trying to balance this with weak growth over here. If it gets too soft, when the housing market tank fundamentally, for example, then it would take everything down. That's why Westpac believe that the interest rate cuts are coming through. I'm not sure everybody's convinced of that, but when it comes down to it, that balance in terms of where the Reserve Bank thinks that how they think the domestic consumption side of things and the housing side of things is balancing off against the resources investment we're getting, that will inform the interest rate position going forward, and that will inform the regional prospects in those sectors. Thank you.